And we just look forward to hearing what he has to say for us. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Over to you, Ben.
Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for the invitation to come. I'm conscious that it actually didn't come from you; it came from Robert. And Robert cornered me. I can't remember where we were, maybe another church service or something. And he said, "Oh, are you able to come and cover for me and just share something about the work of the YMCA?" And I said, "Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I can happily do that." He said, "Yeah, they'll be expecting about a 3-hour talk, so okay, right. So, but that's not going to happen tonight. All right. So." I know we have just prayed, but I would like to just do a reading, really, and whether you accept that as a prayer or not, I'm not too sure. Obviously, we've come out of Christmas. It's all the January blues and that sort of stuff, but I was reminded of a reading, really, a note from our National Secretary. And as I say, you can take this as a prayer or just as some thoughts, and it goes like this. As we draw near to Christmas and at the end of 2023, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank you all for the wonderful work and impactful work across Scotland. Every week we see your news stories of changed lives and changed communities on our social media feeds. At this time of year, as Christmas parties and carol concerts are in full swing, we often hear and sing the words of that well-known Christmas carol, O Little Town of Bethlehem, How Still We See Thee Lie. Yet today, Bethlehem is a noisy and tense with the sounds of war, with high walls of division and fear. Just last week, the Christian church in Bethlehem asked churches around the world not to light their Advent candle of peace this year because there is none in Christ's birthplace. The silent stars are rockets launched into the night air, bringing death and destruction. Our YMCA colleagues and partners in Gaza and East Jerusalem are living and working in the midst of this war. In Ukraine and Belarus and Russia, our YMCA colleagues are working in countries at war with each other. The YMCA has a long history and tradition of peace building, or as a peace building organisation. Just our late dear colleague Jim Thompson bore testament too. It's not just the big world and religion and regional conflicts that we build peace, but also here in Scotland for our work with young people, families and communities. We are all peace builders, and that work can be tiring and exhausting. So this Christmas, I not only pray for peace in a turbulent world, but also for the rest and recuperation for you all. May you also enjoy the everlasting light, love and joy that is the centre of Christmas. Wishing you a blessed Christmas and a wonderful New Year. That really struck me because at Christmas, we all sing the traditional carols. And you know what? A number of times we talk to young people, and we went out carol singing this time with some youngsters, and they don't really understand even how many times Christ is in the word of Christmas. You know, it's the beginning of it, and they sort of don't even realise that, do they? And that realisation about the YMCA is probably why Robert asked me to come and talk tonight, really. Because the YMCA will mean many things to all of you. We'll come back to that in a second. But as in order to give me a bit of confidence, because I know it's a packed audience tonight, and hopefully you're not going to be too hard on me, I thought I would read a couple of quotes, because I was trying to find some sort of introductory things. How about this one? Due to the price of electricity, the light at the end of a tunnel has been switched off. That's a good one. Mother Teresa said, God hasn't called me to be successful, but faithful. Faith isn't faith until it's all you got left to hang on to. Fewer things are more satisfying than seeing your children have teenagers of their own. And we can bear witness to this. So that's quite good. And then I was trying to think of Mike being here. And for a teacher point of view, the only thing that young can do for the old is shock them and keep them up to date. So that was a quote there. But again, we'll come back to some of those in a minute. So the YMCA, the good old YMCA. Where's my notes? I think what I'm going to do is split my talk into 3 parts. One will be a bit of a sort of an overview of what the YMCA is, probably old and new. Secondly, to hone that down a little bit to about what's happening in Tain and North Highland YMCA, and then questions at the end, which I'll be happy to take. However, if you have a burning question as I'm talking, or if I say something you don't really understand or want clarification on, just give me a wave or something, and I'll come back to you. Excuse me. So let's find out, what do you know about the YMCA? Let's be radical here. I'll get my pens. Yep. So let's have some shout-outs. What do we know about the YMCA? Catchy song. I better warn you, all youth workers are failed teachers, all right? So please don't look at the spelling. Right, a catchy song. What else do we know about the YMCA? Okay, so a common... All right, okay, so some sort of accommodation you had there, yeah. What else do you know about the YMCA? Anything, what do you know?
Not just for men.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned the word Christian. Yeah, what else do we know about the YMCA? Anything at all? Yeah, number 1 in the charts. Shh, we've got the catchy song. Number 1, okay, yeah. Anything, what else do we know about the YMCA? I'm avoiding Mandy because she could hopefully fill a page or 2 with this. Anything else about the YMCA? Sorry? Yeah, it's a YMCA in Tain. The Queen was our patron. So the late the Queen was, yeah. I won't write that one up, but yeah, she was that, yep. Okay, so we'll go Goldsby. Yeah. Okay. It's for youth. Yeah, anything else? Yeah, I can sense you warming up here, come on. It's a charity, yeah. So it's got a bit of history, yeah. History men, yeah, okay. What else do we know? Anything at all? Is that it? Yeah. Okay, right. Well, that's going to be a few things to get us started. So let's pick off some of these. We'll go to the history one first. That's the obvious one to start with, isn't it? Okay, a long, long time ago, about 1820s, there was a young man called George Williams. And George Williams was the son of a Somerset farmer. And his dad wanted him to go into the family business and get involved with the farm, but George didn't want to do that. Typical young person, didn't want that at all. He wanted to go to London, where, of course, in those days, everybody thought London, the streets were paved with gold and that type of stuff. So George was a Christian. He'd given his life to the Lord, and he went to London and got an apprenticeship with a tapestry trade, a company called Hitchcock and Rogers. And whilst George was there, he rose through the ranks quite quickly, became like a middle manager. And in those days, of course, it was the industrial era. So, and this is not me being sexist, women, you were to be seen and not heard. The guys, you would be working in the factories at the time, you would have a workbench, and you'd be sleeping underneath a workbench. And that's the way it was. All right? No healthcare, no education, nothing like that at all. There were pubs and a few coffee houses, or taverns and a few coffee houses. So George, talking to friends and stuff, he became very aware that then something needed to be done, especially for the young men. So George held a Bible study in his bedroom, which was also his office. Because he was middle management, he had a desk and a bed in the office, in the room, and he held a Bible study, of which there were 4 people attended. It became quite popular because this was like revolutionary for a lot of the young boys and young men who were working in the factories. And over a period of time, it grew, and the bedroom became too small, so they would go and meet in other sort of buildings. But George's part of his job was to go around and sell the materials and buy more materials, etc. So he would go up to Birmingham or other places and meet with other bosses, and then they would go and do the business of the day, and then the bosses would say, "Come back to our house for dinner." And they probably got the cigars out and played snooker and drank the port or whatever it was. But George would say, "Okay, guys, we've done the business side of today, but I'm going to challenge you now. What are you doing for your employees? How are you caring for them? How are you educating them to become better people? How are you giving them hope where there's hopelessness for a lot of them?" And that for me, as George Williams, that would be through Christ. I have a living relationship with George. And more of these businessmen, you could see the light switch going on, the light bulb moment, and they would say, "Yes, you're absolutely right. If we look after our employees, they're more likely to work better for us." And then over a period of time, the work took George to other countries, especially in Europe. And in 1844, on the 6th of June, there was a big conference, and the YMCA was born. And famous other people have come out of the YMCA, and I'm going to give you a bit of a quiz in just a minute from that. So the YMCA has been going since 6th of June 1844. We are now the world's oldest and largest youth organisation. So we've overtaken everybody out, okay? We now exceed that. So let's take a side step here. I'm going to do a little quiz for you. And the good news is you're not going to be changing sides or anything like that. Let me find my quiz. It's a simple true or false quiz. So where am I? Right, let's see about this. So I feel like I've got glasses on my head here. Right, okay, so true or false? The YMCA stands for Young Men's Community Association. Is that true? That's false. What's it stand for? Yeah, Young Men's Christian Association. So we'll just deal with that because somebody said about the men only. Yeah, in 1844, as you heard, it was for men only. All right. Being young, that was really the audience or the target range that George was working with at the time. All right. However, all right, okay. So that's a young. Men's, well, we know that was a period of time. Christian, it had to be Christian. Association just means we're associated with those other YMCAs around the world. All right. What about this one as a true or false? The YMCA invented basketball. You've all played basketball, I'm sure, in your youth. Have you? Is that a true or a false? At the back, true or false? True. True, yeah, okay, it is true, yeah. The YMCA in America in 1891.
Canada.
No, it was yeah, Naismith, yes. I thought it was America. He knows more than I do, you better come and take over. Yeah, oh, okay. Yeah, so the YMCA invented basketball, racquetball, volleyball, and softball. And I read only the other day it was sort of the initiator of indoor five-side football as well. I didn't really realise that. And I think I read it was the Liverpool YMCA who then eventually had the official size of a five-side football pitch. They used their hall. Right, what about this one? The YMCA volunteers drove T-wagons in the army, or for the army in both world wars. What do you think that is? True, false? Well, that was true. Yeah. All right. So we, as part of our work, we go where the needs are. And when I first became a youth and community worker, my first post was in the Chelmsford YMCA as a very, very young CEO, which sounded very grand. And there was we had a volunteer at the age of 80 In fact, it was probably 78 when I started. And he used to come in every day and count the takings from the day before and walk it round to the bank. But the reason I'm saying this was he used to drive one of the tea wagons in the war. That was pretty amazing. And his name was Charles, wasn't it? Charles, I can't remember his surname off the top of my head. But anyway, he used to worry us because he was old school. He would take a different route to the bank every day. And some days he might have gone with like a fiver or something. But another day we might have had a very good week with some donations or fundraising. He'd be gone for hours and we'd send out people to sort of try and find him. Right, what about this one? True or false? The YMCA building was used to house the first Boy Scout troop meeting. Boy Scouts, did they have their first meeting in the YMCA? Yes, that's true. Yeah, Birkenhead YMCA, closely followed by Nottingham YMCA, where Lord Baden-Powell first held his scout troops. In fact, Lord Baden-Powell is very closely associated with the YMCA. What about this one? This will get you thinking. The first recorded selling of a poppy, you know, the red poppies that we buy in November, was through a YMCA volunteer. Is that true or false? Yeah, Mike knows all the answers to here. The answer is true. Right, the selling of a poppy, the first ever recorded selling of a poppy was by a YMCA worker called Monique in Chicago. There was a YMCA conference there. She was doing some admin, and while the conference was on, she read the poem by Colonel the Flounders. I can't remember his name now. Yeah, the Floundersfield poem, and she was so moved, she went out, bought some poppies from the local market, went back in and sold them to the YMCA guys, and that's and then she gave the money to the war veterans, and that's the first ever recorded selling of a poppy. Right, and that was in 1918. What about this one? The YMCA was responsible for creating lifeguard courses. Very different now. True, false? I think you're getting the hang of this now. They're all nearly true, aren't they? Yes, of course it is. Yes, the American YMCA created the voluntary lifeguarding courses way back in 1912. Okay. YMCA created Mother's Day. False. God, right, you are right. Got you, I was going to say. Right, yeah, it didn't, in fact, create Mother's Day, but it did create Father's Day. Yeah, in 1910, we created Father's Day. The YMCA operates in 65 different countries. Sorry? More? Yeah. Any other ideas? Less? Is that false? True? False? Yeah. We operate in 122 different countries. Don't ask me to name 122 different countries out of 190 that are in the world, or 190 something. But that's right, we operate in 122. And we use that international experience. I've taken young people to Finland, Mandy and I have taken youngsters to music festivals, YMCA festivals in Prague 3 times now. And I've done Austria and lots of other different countries. And I love that white knuckle ride. When you take youngsters away on an aeroplane for that first time, this is an impersonation of my wife before we've even taken off. Right? And I'm looking over at the kids on the next seat next to us, and they're gripping the handle. It's great. I love that. But we've got youngsters that have actually never really been outside of Tain. So just flying them somewhere, just going outside of Tain, seeing that whole new wide world is quite something. The YMCA has over 65 million people involved. Well, the answer to that is true. 65 million people are involved. I should have been able to give you more statistics, like over 10,000 people are influenced by YMCA programs in Scotland, 28 different YMCAs in Scotland. In the 80s, late 80s, 90s, the YMCA was the 3rd largest provider of accommodation per night. Trust House 40, I think, was a leader, and there was one other. But we still do that. We still do the accommodation in every major towns, really. So let's go back to our list here. So historically, Yeah, we know the YMCA has been around for a long, long time. And actually, it's influenced the way we operate, the sports we play, and all that sort of stuff, as well as creating things like Father's Day, etc. If we go back to the youth, young, things have evolved. We have to evolve, don't we? We have to change. And that's not saying change for change's sake. That's actually saying, what are the needs of the community? And that really is a good point for the YMCA and a bad point for the YMCA. And the good point is each YMCA you will ever go into will not look the same, unless it's like an accommodation block that's had the same architects, in which case they would tend to look very similar. But every YMCA you go into will be different. And the reason for that is it's there to meet the needs of the local community. So the needs of Tain will be very different to Edinburgh or London or Bristol or places, Liverpool or wherever. And so it's the skills and the professionalism of the staff to actually say, what are the needs of Tain? You know, and how can we respond to that? And that doesn't mean we have to take on every single need, because there'll be needs that we just physically can't do. But if there's a need, then we can solve that need, or at least try and influence it. Then that's what we can do, or we try to do. So the downside to that is, with each YMCA, the level of Christian input will be down to the most senior manager, really, right? And at Tain, obviously, that's me. And that's why I say it's regrettably, you might go into some YMCAs and you will actually say, where is God? And that pains me to say that, because our aims and purposes are about leading young people to Christ. That was what George wanted. He wanted people to have whole lives in body, mind, and spirit. And actually, the symbol of the YMCA, unfortunately, I've changed pens, is a red triangle, you know, and it is body, mind, and spirit. It's that wholeness approach about the way we work with young people or communities. You know, we don't want just super fit human beings. We want that whole package. And that's what we try and do with the young people, is to deal with that holistic approach with them. So it is sad, I have to say that. But and it's part of my role to ensure that the boards of management, because we all have to have governance, we all have to run ourselves properly, because we're all charities, it's my job to make sure that they are all Christian. Because if we start watering down the people at the very top, before we know it, we'll be allowing other sports or other activities to come in and dilute the Christian impact. Yeah. Yep. Every YMCA will be a registered charity, and they will have a board of management or board of directors. We've actually just changed. So we used to be called the Tain and District Youth Cafe YMCA. That was our title. That was when we were created back in the sort of 1990s. And I'll tell you a bit more about the history there. But we've just changed because that charity was what they called an unincorporated charity, and which didn't really give a lot of protection to board members if anything went pear-shaped. But it's just the way it was in the 90s and beyond, you know, earlier than that when charities were formed. Now what's happened is there's Oscar, the charity regulator, has set up something called SCIOs, which stand for Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisations. And we wanted to become that for several reasons. One, that it gave more protection for board members. Two, when I do fundraising, and I say, oh, we're from Tain, we're a Tain Youth Cafe, you know, the main headquarters for funders is like Glasgow, Edinburgh, London, and you can just hear them on the phone saying, where is Tain? And we have no idea. And then the Youth Cafe, well, we've moved on from just being a youth cafe. That's just one element that we have. And so being called a youth cafe wasn't really a real representation of what we were doing in the community. So we wanted to change. So our actual title now is Tain and North Highland YMCA. Officially, it's got SCIO at the end, but we only have to put that on headed paper and websites and things like that. So, and that gave us a good sort of brief that we could actually move further north if we wanted to, because the Tain and district in the old constitution was just about working with the catchment of a Tain Royal Academy, whereas now we can develop our work even further, Goldsby was mentioned, yeah, there was a YMCA up there. And in fact, I met the lady who's working in their building that they were using at the time. So we've just changed our name to do that, really. Regarding just the youth bit, I can tell you now there are programs in YMCAs that run from 2 weeks of age right the way up to the 90s plus who come in, right? So we cover a whole wide range now, right? So for instance, at Tain, we do an under one support group, so young parents mainly, first-time parents come in on a Monday morning and meet with one of my staff, and they bring their babies in, that sort of stuff. We've also done very young teenage mums, and in fact in Chelmsford, Mandy set up a program called Steps, which was about encouraging positive parenting, and it was about working with teenage mums. I think the youngest was about 14, something like that. Young girl had teenagers. And what was interesting about that was that the health authority didn't really work with teenage mums. And so they came to us, and Mandy was talking to the staff of the health authority about how to run programs for that. And in fact, it was quite successful. You took a group up to Parliament, didn't you, to talk to some MPs about it. It was quite influential at the time. So I could tell you, so we've run programs for youngsters at 2 weeks of age, rarely working with the parents, obviously. But I could tell you there's a YMCA in Wales that runs a funeral parlour, because there's a big hostel in one of the YMCAs there. Resident died, and the manager, the senior guy, was so disappointed about how the funeral directors dealt with this young person who was living in the hostel and sadly passed away, that he set up his own, or the YMCA set up a funeral parlour. I can't remember if it's still going now, but it was a need there. And he felt that's something the YMCA, with its uniqueness of working with young people, could have an impact on. So we cover a very wide range. Men and women, well, up until the 1960s, women weren't allowed in the YMCA. We had a sister movement called the YWCA. But in the 1960s, I think it was 67, women were allowed into the YMCA. And in fact, more women use the YMCA now than men. How about that? All right, okay. Slightly different concepts. The YMCA is what we call a bottom-up organisation. So we respond to the needs of the community, and we run ourselves, that autonomy that each YMCA has. The YWCA is a top-down organisation. Their headquarters, I think, is in Oxford. So they might contact all the YWCAs and say, I don't know, this is very silly. We want you to all play Snakes and Ladders as one of your program, and they would almost have to do that sort of thing. Whereas now, or with the YMCA, our headquarters, which is in Edinburgh, could say, we would like you to all participate in Snakes and Ladders, and we could easily say, no, well, that's just not a need for Tain, all right? That's a very silly example, but I hope you get the point. The Christian song, the catchy song, YMCA, don't worry, I'm not going to get you to all dance to that tonight. Yes, it's in the top 10 of all disco hits ever created, and yes, it's a song that everybody loves to hear apart from me, all right? And the reason I say that is when I first got that job in Chelmsford in '86, I became a licensee. The YMCA had a bar. And it got the bar, unbelievably, on educational grounds. I'd never heard of that before in my life. And apparently the General Secretary, or CEO before me, he had a sideline of looking after people's dogs. And the Chief Constable of Essex was one of the dogs that he looked after. So one night, the YMCA got broken into, and behind the YMCA is a train, the main train line, and the burglar had run off down there. And so he quickly rang the Chief Constable of Essex, and with his help, they caught this guy. So the Chief Constable said, anything we can do for you, give us a shout. So he said, well, actually, underage drinking is a big issue, and we need to do something about it. What about can we get a license to work with young people and alcohol? And he did. They got it. It was incredible. I'd never heard of that before. And in fact, years after we went there, we turned it into a live music venue. And it ranked 51st in the country of live music venues. We did that for probably about 4 or 5 years, and then it sort of just died a bit, so we ripped the bar out and we did something different. So the song, and the reason I'm saying that is every Saturday night we hired the venue out. So if you can imagine, for 15 years, every Saturday night, we had a DJ who would say, "Guess where we are tonight? Yeah, why?" Oh. So it's like, oh, not again. Okay, so that's I've picked off some of those sort of things there. So YMCA in Tain. Well, I've told you a little bit about how we've changed charities. That's really a governance thing. Our mission statement is releasing the potential of all children, young people, and families in the community. All right, we want to release them, especially into that wholeness approach of body, mind, and spirit. All right. So I think there's something like 5 of us who work there now, and I have a children and families worker. So basically, if it's primary age and moves, it's her responsibility. We've got a part-time youth worker, and her and we sort of do the youth work side of it. The others are sort of cleaners and bookkeepers and that sort of stuff. But we are the 3 main what I would call program staff. So we have programs for children. I've mentioned the under ones already. We've got a crafty club, a baking club. We have what's called a transitions group. Because up here in the rural communities, we've got something like Port Mahomet. It's got a primary school there. It's got 2 children who are in P7. Now, come August, they're going to move. Those 2 children are going to move to a school, Tain Royal Academy, 500, well, just under maybe 500 pupils. And they might not even be with that other child from Port Mahomet. So it's quite a daunting experience. And so we run every Monday night a transitions program for young people for age P7s. We have anything up to 50 attend each week, out of a school roll of about 87, I think it is. So that's quite good. So when they move up, they know other faces. They'll be in class with people they've met and had a social time, whether it be a disco or playing pool or whatever. We have a junior bake-off type group. We have a young carers group, all those sorts of things for young ones. When they reach the older ones, we've got a girls group that's run by a Christian lady. We've got drop-in sessions. We've just started an autism support group for teenagers. We have a thriving youth committee. We like to get young people involved. They're our eyes and our ears, as we say. So we've got a cafe crew, we've got a youth committee, we've got a PA crew. They come in and help us run things like discos and the P7 groups and all those sorts of things. And they can obtain national awards now, which get put onto their sort of school achievement records. So there's Youth Achievement, Dynamic Youth, Saltire, and High Fives. So the High Fives is really for the younger ones. We do 2-3 drop-in nights a week. We do a monthly disco for that age range. We also do a disco once a month for the primary school. We have anything up to 80 to 100 book-in every once on a Friday, which is quite loud, and it can be at times. But those are the sorts of things we do. And then I tend to get more involved with the community side. So we run what's called a Christian outreach group. We've been doing that for about 10 years, and other churches now have been part of that, so whether it be New Wine Church, the Free Church. Mike and Carla have played at our events. We do a hot cross buns event on Good Friday. We've done Christmas events as well, and that's quite good to actually go out into the community. And that's really, I think, the encouragement. If I was to say to you, what can you be taking away from this tonight? It's about how do you use 20 people, no, not 20, you 3 or 4 in here, how do you impact your estate here? This is your community, your neighbours. How are you doing that? And things like the cafe church would be a brilliant idea, but how's the message going out? Because I have to say, one of the best reports I ever read was, I believe, a Church of Scotland report. It was called Church Without Walls. All the time we're saying, come in, come in, come in. And that's quite daunting, isn't it, to cross the church, that line, apart from a wedding or a funeral sort of thing. It's about how are you taking the message out, and that's the big thing, I think. We have to be obviously very careful when working with young people. So any Christian programs we do, we actually have to physically say on the poster, this is a Christian poster. This is a Christian program. So at the moment, I've just restarted doing what's called a Quest program for young people, which is almost like a pre-alpha program. It's based on a Youth for Christ program, last 7 weeks. How many will come? I'm not really sure. I had 3 last Thursday. And they turned up late, so we're going to restart it again on Thursday. But this is an opportunity for us to ensure that the young people have the right information. Because quite often we say, oh yeah, do this, do that, but we're asking them to make decisions based on things they don't really understand. So things like the Quest program from the Youth for Christ will help do that, sort of give them that right information. Golspie was mentioned. Yes, there was a YMCA in Golspie, well before Tain, I think. The building still has YMCA on it, but it's now run by Go Golspie. I think it was Lord Sutherland who gave Community Council the building. They in turn gave it to the YMCA, but if a YMCA stopped doing work in the building, it had to revert back to the Community Council, I think. So there's something called Go Golspie, and they now run that. They are doing youth work in there, but it's run basically by Highland type stuff and Go Golspie, so nothing to do with the YMCA. I did hear that there are 2 or 3 other folks in Golspie who are still YMCA members. I've yet to meet those people, but I'm sure one day I will, sort of thing. And the charity, well, I think we've sort of dealt with that. Going back to Tain, though, the way Tain started was simply there was a fight between 2 boys, and it was over a girl in Tain. I'm sure you've all been to Tain. We've got this lovely rose garden, and the fight happened at the top of the rose garden, and one boy pushed another. He fell down the rose garden steps, tragically broke his neck and died. It wasn't meant to happen. It was just fisticuffs, handbags at dawn stuff, but it was a wake-up call to the community. And so there was a public meeting, and which was run by Alistair Rind, who's still a councillor today. And they decided something had to be done. So they tried running a youth group in several church hall type things. Doesn't really work, sharing of halls. But I think they were really waiting for a building to become available on the high street, but of course it never did. And then where we are was a plumber's shop and yard called Burgess's. And it was in the late 90s that they moved into there on a 3-year lease, and after 3, they got some funding from Children in Need for a part-time worker for a year, then another one. Both of those 2 guys became ministers in the Church of Scotland, so I'm not promising anything. And then after the 3rd year, the owners said, well, we've got good news and bad news. The bad news is we're selling the building. The good news is we'll give you first opportunity to buy it. We want £70,000 and we'll give you 6 weeks. And 6 weeks later, they've raised £70,000. All right. We had a very good fundraiser called Fiona Robertson, who now is involved with Blytheswood, and she raised the majority of that, but they did fundraising events as well. But obviously, the majority came from trusts and things like that. But they own the building. So Children in Need said, well, you're serious, so we'll get serious. We'll give you funding for 3 years for a full-time worker. They must be a qualified youth and community worker. And, excuse me. And so out of desperation, I think they employed me because nobody else wanted it. And we've just grown from there, sort of thing. Right. I think I'll just check my notes. We heard in that very beginning part from that Kerry's reading about the international side of the YMCA. I suppose the biggest thing we're doing at the moment is obviously working in Ukraine. We were obviously before the recent hostilities, Israel. So, for instance, in Ukraine there were 24 YMCAs. There's only now 17 YMCAs. Some have been destroyed. Some have had to close because the volunteers have moved. There's ongoing talks between all the countries around there, backdoor sort of talks, they're communicating with each other, trying to understand people to help what's happening. The YMCA in Europe obviously really rallied round, and they created something like 114 different projects for those struggling coming out of Ukraine. They secured 5,000 laptops for young people, again for Ukraine there. And it goes on and on and on. So that is just one part of the international side. And as I said earlier, we like that international side because we can take young people and it just broadens their horizon. But in 1844, when George created the YMCA, they had a bit of scripture which was very relevant at the time, which was John 17:11. I will remain in the world no longer, but they are still in the world, and I am coming to you, Holy Father. Protect them by the power of your name, the name you gave me, so that they may be one, just as we are one. And that's why the majority of YMCAs have the same aims and purposes about leading young people to Christ. And I think sometimes that's quite difficult for us as youth workers, because for many youngsters, that's the beginning of their journey. We might not see the end of that journey. So in a sense, it's planting those seeds any way we can. We have young people who say, give me a free Mars bar. Well, why? Well, because you're a Christian. Well, I'll say things like, you're confusing Christianity with stupidity. Why should I give you a free Mars bar? Give away my stock. But, what we might say is, well, you tell me what you know about what Christianity is, and you might get the Mars bar. I've even had that same conversation over, can you give me a free cup of tea? Well, no, but hang on. If you tell me give me 4 components of what Christianity is, that would be your milk, your tea bag, your sugar, your hot water. It's amazing what young people will do for a cuppa sometimes, But it's about just using anything that comes along, And we have to adapt to that, don't we, as the older generation, so to speak. That's just sort of some rambling thoughts there. I was going to end with a couple of quotes, because obviously working with young people can be a bit sort of hard, but there was a couple of quotes here. When I look for the younger generation, I despair for the future of civilization. Right? And when we look at young people now, sometimes we can think that, but actually that was written by Aristotle in the 4th century. So young people haven't perhaps changed, perhaps our view has. Youth has no regard for old age, and the wisdom of the centuries is looked down upon as both stupidity and foolishness. The young men are indolent, and the young women are indecent and decorous in their speech, behavior, and dress. And that was written 8 centuries ago by Peter the Hermit in 1114. So the track record of young people is not particularly good. Children today are tyrants. They contradict their parents, gobble their food, and tyrannize their teachers. And that was Socrates in 425 BC. So, the quote I think I'm going to end with, though, is from Churchill. With opportunity comes responsibility. And that's something that I do talk on quite a lot when I'm talking to groups. With opportunity comes responsibility. We have a responsibility to work with young people, children, with families. A lot of people need help these days, whether it be the food or the cost of living crisis or whatever it is. But actually, the thing that a lot of them need is that hope, and I mentioned that at the beginning. And that's something that obviously Jesus can give us, that hope to survive, that hope to move on, that purpose. And we all know as Christians that having that peace that Jesus brings into our lives is just phenomenal, because we will never be alone. We have a Lord who is there 25/8, not let alone 24/7. He's there 25/8. We can go to him at any time. So I have absolutely no idea what the time is, and that's okay. You stayed awake, so that's a plus win for me. But I'm more than happy to take any questions if you have any.
About 10 years ago, wandering the street as street pastors, you said that there was a looming epidemic for kids being hooked on the monitor.
Hooked on the?
On the monitor.
The monitor?
Monitor. The smartphone wasn't invented yet.
All right, okay.
Just the, what is it, PC.
Yeah.
At the time I didn't believe you. It looks now that was a very wise prediction.
Yeah.
How, on the moment, can you deal, do you deal, or should we deal with that problem that you already 10 years ago kind of thought it was coming and it is now here?
Yep, okay. So when the YMCA in Tain bought the building, we got a group of youngsters together. We called them a youth committee because that's the sort of thing that funders love. And we said, what is it you want? Because this is not my building. I work here. I'm going to lock the door at 10 o'clock or whatever and go home. This is your place. Youth work is voluntary. They've got to want to come. Education is a legal requirement. You have to be at school. Youth work is not. It's a voluntary It's a voluntary option. So we got this group together and said, what is it you want? And the top thing, I went into the school, did every PSE class. And Mandy came in with some of those for me. The top thing was sports. Well, we didn't have any land. We only had this building, and that was it. So we could do table tennis, but that was probably it. Coffee bar and live music. Well, as I said, we couldn't really do the sports. Coffee bar we could certainly do, and live music was something we could look at. Though my experience, having come from Chelmsford and the live music scene, was rarely. That was sort of the 16 and a half upwards who wanted live music, but the problem with that, they wanted the alcohol, and the Tain was just not going to do that. So the group, we said, okay, put your wish list together, and you can imagine we had some silly things, a swimming pool inside the building, we had pole dancing, we had, it was just like, nightmare. But we had our things we wanted to do. We had this backyard, which is where the plumbers used to come in with their gear and everything. But the roof had asbestos, and so we needed to do that and make other arrangements because the windows, if you go past the YMCA in Tain, they look very different to the ones in the old chip shop over the road. That's because we ripped them all out for two reasons. We wanted to keep the noise level in, and we wanted to put more fire exits so we could have more young people in. But one thing they wanted was the internet, because unbelievably, in 2003, they didn't have smartphones, they didn't have the internet. And believe it or not, I used to sell them credit to go onto our, the internet, that funny, horrendous noise that used to be when you plugged onto the internet. And we still got those today, those two computers, but underneath it, not the original computers, but underneath there's two slots, and they used to feed the cards that they would buy the credit from us. But what this has meant is that young people now, it's a very different world to when we were young people. How did we hear what was happening in Australia or Jerusalem or wherever? Well, it would be from the papers or from the news, and that might have been a few days old sort of thing. Whereas now, flashes up on your internet. I've got an ordinary phone, it flashes up breaking news or whatever, because I do like the news, I'm one of those saddos. But it comes up very quickly. But it means that the youngsters live in a very instant world. They want it now, But it's also culturally made a change. We set up street pastors because underage drinking and drinking in general was rife in Tain. I would be getting 100 teenagers on a Friday night, of which 80 had had a drink. We were saving lives on a Friday night, and I know that because the ambulance people have told us. I don't even open 2 Fridays a month now. And why is that? It's because things have changed. They don't need to stay in Tain after school, because that was happening originally back then. Well, they were staying in to see their friends, whereas now they go home, they're on their phones or on their PCs, and they're chatting away to their friends. They don't need to be in Tain. Also, things like the school now close at 1 o'clock. So they don't close at 3:45 now, so at 1 o'clock the kids go home. Parents can't be too bothered about bringing them back in, or, the bus services aren't so good as they used to be. So, things have changed quite considerably. Underage drinking, I'm pleased to say, I can't remember the last drunk young person I had. That's a bold statement, isn't it, However, vaping, massive, right? Drugs is there just like it will be here, all right? So, there are different issues that we have to deal with in partnership, because we're not experts in any of those things, but we try and deal with it in partnerships with those who do know how to do it. So Cast Highland, the charity that Mandy runs, we employed an addictions worker for a couple of years, and she was actually working inside the school. Regrettably, then COVID hit, and unfortunately we didn't secure enough money to keep her on. It was only a 2-year contract, but she was working in the schools, and we were sort of helping with that by helping her do that. So I think I was just in the right place at the right time to predict those sorts of things, really. But
current needs, would you say, if you're trying to?
I suppose a big thing we've been doing at the moment is realising the cost of living affects us all, every single person in this room. So for the last few years, we've been doing free meals over the school holidays, Easter, summer, and October. The problem I have with that, it depends on the size of the grant, because the cost of the food has gone up from £500 and something a week to about £750 a week. Now I have to secure that funding from trusts, etc. Now, sometimes I've been very successful. So a couple of summers ago, we did something like 6,000 picnic lunches in 6 weeks. This Easter, we might not be able to do any at all, because I just haven't got the money in to be able to do that. So there will be children who will go hungry this summer. Do all those 6,000 children need that food? No, they don't, but we're not going to discriminate between who does and who doesn't. Because just like, when you think of food banks, it used to be people on the benefits who needed the food bank. Now it's the working poor, they're called. People who do have jobs, but actually they've probably got 2 jobs just to try and stand still. So, the food is one, I would say. But as I say, the cost of living has affected us all. I'm sure your electric bill has gone up just like ours has. At the YMCA, our electric bill went up from £1,800 a year to nearly £6,000. I don't make £6,000 selling penny sweets in a coffee bar. So my job is really, unfortunately, chase the money sometimes, and I'm not into that really. But it's just the way it is to survive. I think it's helping people deal with that quickness of life nowadays. That's what I'd like to really tackle, because it is a very instant world. They want everything now and all that sort of stuff. And how do we bring God into that sometimes? That's the challenge, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Talk about funding. Find any opposition to the fact that you're a Christian organisation, and therefore limits where you can go to for your funding?
Yeah, some trusts won't fund Christian organisations. That's just the way it is. Highland, for instance, won't give you any money for doing Christian programmes. So you just have to think about how you word types of applications, and then I have to laugh, because the Highland won't fund Christian programs, but actually everything I do is Christian. So whether it's just a drop-in program, that might not be a Christian program per se, but if a young person says, I want to learn about God, I'll tell them. Now I've not set out to do that for that particular night, but that's about responding in a professional way to that question. And I always use Mike as a good example here, because I remember once he said in his lessons, a young person might come up to me and say, I want to learn about Islam. And so Mike used to say, well, I'll tell you about Islam, but we'll do a comparison at the same time with Christianity. So yeah, okay, the kid was learning, or the young person was learning about Islam, but at the same time, he was doing that comparison. How does that relate to Christianity? And I'd love that, So I'm not sure I answered the question, but trust is just chasing money. And I have to say, in COVID, we had our best financial year ever, because people were just throwing money. I was putting in some pretty horrendous applications, and nobody was more surprised when the cheque would arrive or the treasurer would ring up and say, we've had a back payment, what's this, £5,000? And I'll be going, I have no idea really. But it came in, whereas now everybody's gone back, and it's like you've got to justify every penny. And it's not just the applications, because in the good old days, it used to be, how many people would you have in, boys, girls, what times you open. Now, It's all about the journey of young people, where have they moved from to get to, it's all that sort of stuff. And sometimes the evaluations take longer than the applications these days. Just the way it is. You just got to roll with it, But it is getting harder and harder because they're tightening up, Because a lot of trusts, the way they work is that they give, the money they give out is the interest they've earned from their initial money that they've set aside. So, if interest rates are very low, then the amount of money they're able to give out is going to be lower. And we all know what's happening at the moment, of course. So, but it is getting hard, yeah.
So is that your biggest job?
Yeah, as a manager, yeah. Because all the staff, myself included, we're on short-term contracts, and that's just the way it always is in this type of work. 3 years, 1 year, 2 years, whatever. Very different. Very unusual to get one longer than 3 years. But Tain, isn't a rich YMCA. We live day to day, really. So 2 of the staff contracts run out next year. I've got my part-time youth worker runs out in August. So I've got to get the money to keep her on, sort of thing. But they know that, and that's part of the job, I suppose. Because youth work was seen as a vocation, that's what you did. Whereas now, obviously, we all have bills to pay, and we are professional youth and community workers as well. Yeah. So that is a challenge as a manager, the fundraiser. But that applies to any trust, there. Yeah. Any other questions?
So given the widespread that you work with, what are you able to share in terms of what's touched you the most, what's challenged you the most?
In terms of touch me, I suppose, it's about when young people actually do ask you questions about God and stuff like that. So, for instance, we don't do anything Halloween, right? As an organisation, or in Tain YMCA, we have nothing to do with Halloween. We will not have anything to do with Harry Potter or anything like that. Because for me, that is like an introduction to the cult. And the devil's a clever devil, isn't he? I know of even some schools use Harry Potter books as part of their English, Well, hang on, that's making the devil sound fun. That's making witches sound fun. The occult sound fun. So we have nothing to do with that. So we had a couple of boys on our youngsters on our PA crew who were saying to the staff, why don't we do Halloween? And that's that little nugget suddenly they're in. Why don't we do it? Well, because we're a Christian organisation, And I think those two boys will come on the Quest programme because they've started to think about God for that first time. It's that light bulb moment, So it's those sort of gems, really, when you suddenly see that. Because as I said earlier, we just plant seeds, really. Somebody else takes over the discipleship and the teaching and the training further on down the line. That's just the way it is. Yeah, that's a frustration as well, because sometimes you want to see young people, make that commitment, and it's just not going to happen in that time, sort of thing. Yeah. So, Any other questions?
When you say it's Tain in North Highland.
Yep.
Is it open to any young people? Like, for
Yes.
instance, if there's somebody from Invergordon, right?
Yes, we have people.
Say, right, well, I know this is running, which might be useful to you.
Yeah.
Like the young mothers or young people, like we have our own young parents.
Yeah, we don't. That's our catchment area now is Tain and North Highland. But we would come and work here, though at the same time we are aware of other youth work services in the area. There's a lady called Jeanette who works at Allness in the place and the big field, the tent you've got. Her heart's in the right place. She does some fantastic work with the team. Very different to us, because you won't find the Christian element there, That doesn't make hers wrong. It just means we've got a different perspective, that body, mind and spirit, that holistic approach. No, we don't just, we wouldn't say you can't come in because you're from Milton or Invergordon or Allness or whatever. No. Any other questions? Okay, well, I think that is it. So I don't know how you normally close these things. So shall we just perhaps close with a prayer? And then obviously we're around. I'll probably get a warm cup of coffee now because mine's gone cold. We'll just take it from this. Let's just pray. So Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this opportunity we've had tonight, just hearing about your work through the YMCA. We just thank you that George Williams, all those years ago, was a young man who just went and felt called to go and share the gospel to the other young men in London. And from there, Lord, we just thank you that your word has just spread through the work of the YMCA. So we just thank you that we can now just ponder on those words that have been heard tonight, that we can see that anything with opportunity does come responsibility, that anything we do, if we do it with you at the centre, everything is possible. So I just thank you for this time that I've had for sharing, and thank you for these fantastic folks who are listening. And we just ask that you'll bless us now as we socialise over good coffee and chat. In your name. Amen.